Welcome to the John Freakin' Muir Pod. Lace up those boots and sling on the pack for a romp through trails, short and long. With your host and Renaissance man, Doc. It's time to embrace the suck.
Welcome back to another week on the trail. I'm Doc, and this is the John Freakin' Muir Pod. Let's start off with a reminder. If you are enjoying the podcast, take just a minute, help us out, leave us a review on Apple Podcasts. And if you are not enjoying the pod, well, just go ahead and keep that to yourself. All right, let's get to this week's guest. Welcome to the podcast, recent Triple Crowner, Justin Helmkamp. How you doing, Justin?
I'm doing good. Happy to be here.
Now, when I say recent Triple Crowner, it's pretty recent.
Like just barely over 2 weeks. This is since I finished up on the CDT in Glacier, so it's pretty fresh right now. It's super recent.
That is fantastic. Congratulations.
Thank you. Yeah, it's quite the journey.
Has it sunk in yet?
It's starting to. I'm starting to like get super nostalgic about it, kind of towards the end. It's just like, I want to be done. Like I'm tired and sick of walking all the time. But now that I've been off trail for a couple of weeks and the glamour of having town food every day has worn off, it's just kind of like, oh man, starting to miss it again. But that's how it goes.
Nice. And how many trail miles do you have under your boots or your trail runners?
I don't have an exact. I think I'm in the neighborhood of 9,000 to 10,000. The Triple Crown, obviously, and then some other trails that I'm sure we'll talk about. So,
got it. Have you listened to the podcast before?
Yeah, I've listened to a couple episodes. He had Rocket, Julia Sheehan on. Listened to a bit of hers. Listened to a bit of Legends. So I was just kind of scrolling through. I was like, who do I recognize that's been on here? So I want to hear from them.
A couple of good characters right there.
Yeah, for sure.
Hey, the reason I ask is because we go strictly by trail name on the podcast here. If you have a trail name, so do you have a trail name?
I do. It's Two Taps, number 2 TAPS.
Two Taps. Okay, and we have to always hear about this story behind the trail name. How'd you end up with that?
Well, I got to go all the way back to when I first started through hiking, 2016, Appalachian Trail. How most people, I think, get into this life. And I started in June because I didn't know what I was doing. I didn't do enough research, and it didn't click in my head that June in Georgia was just going to be stupidly hot and muggy and disgusting. So I started June 5th. And so day 5, June 10th, I'm going up. I believe the mountain's Trey Mountain. It's been a while since I've been on the AT side. I think it was Trey Mountain, something like that. It's like 60 or so miles in. And I'm tired. I'm hot. I've been sweating since 7 a.m. and having a rough time. And this is my first backpacking trip I've ever done is the AT. So I set the bar way too high. And about 2/3 of the way up, I see a blaze on a tree, and I take my trekking pole and I just whack it really hard 2 times. And the guy was like, I was hiking with, was like, what'd you do that for? I was like, tell this stupid trail that it hasn't beaten me yet. And so it kind of turned into a motivation thing. It was just when I was just having a rough time, I'd take the pole, just give the trail a couple whacks, be like, hey man, I'm still here, even though I'm not happy right now. And as the trail has gone on and more miles have come under my feet, it's kind of turned into like a, hey trail, it's good to be here. I'm happy to be out here. So yeah, it morphed a little bit, but the genesis of it was anger for sure.
I was going to ask if it didn't morph. I was going to ask on what mile did your poles break after whacking the trees so hard?
Oh man, so I don't know how much you want to get into how I did my hikes yet, but I did a flip flop on the AT that first year, and I think the total mileage would have been about 1,300 miles in or so. I broke with the first pole, which was for me in New Hampshire. So yeah, it didn't quite make it all the way. And then I lost the second one to rocks in Pennsylvania, but I think everybody does at some point.
That sounds like a common occurrence. Yeah.
Yeah. So.
All right. Hey, a regular feature we have on the podcast here is the Pro Tip Insight of the Week. And that is a segment towards the end of the episode where I will turn to you, Two Taps, and I will ask you to share a bit of trail wisdom with our listeners to make their next outdoor experience even better. So don't be surprised when I ask you for your pro tip at the end.
Sounds good.
Okay. Hey, and another feature we've been doing this season is the Must Bring Gear Review, sponsored by the ultralight backpacking gear company, Outdoor Vitals. And here's how it works. If you were to let a stranger pack your bag with pretty much generic gear for a multi-day hike, what is the one specific piece of gear you would insist on being packed? And if you've got a particular brand for that specific piece of gear, even better. So Justin, or I'm sorry, Two Taps, what is your must-bring piece of gear?
My favorite piece of gear that I bring on every hike, whether it's a day hike or a through hike, doesn't matter at this point. I started carrying one on the PCT, is a umbrella. I use the Montbell. I think it's the UL Sun umbrella, I think is the model. I like it because the spokes on the umbrella fold in on itself, so you can pack it down really small, and it's like 6 or 7 ounces. But it's one of those things that it's like, it comes in so clutch when it's like least expected, and you don't use it a lot, but when you use it, it's like, man, it's really nice to have an umbrella right now. Like if it's dumping rain, you just kind of huddle under it. It's like, well, my legs are wet, but my top half's totally dry, and most of my pack is dry, so that's cool. So yeah, I think the UL Sun umbrella, it's pretty clutch.
Okay, and what is the weight on that?
I want to say they have a couple versions. I think the one that I have is like 8 ounces. They might have a 6-ounce version.
Okay.
Something like that. Yeah. They also have options that are not like the reflective stuff, just like black or green or just like basic colors that don't do reflection that I think are a little bit lighter than that, but you'd have to check. So okay. Montbell, there might be a couple other companies that do something similar too, but go with whatever works for you.
All right. And our listeners know that I like to talk about gear, and especially the evolution of gear. So I know that you did the AT in 2016. Was that your first overnight hike?
First overnight hike ever.
That is crazy. That's nuts, man.
I set the bar way too high.
Yeah. And so you did the AT in 2016, you did the PCT in 2017, and then you finished up with the CDT this past year. How much did your gear weigh in 2016? And then how did it evolve through this past year's hike?
So I was lucky that when I was first starting on the AT, I had worked at a summer camp with a guy who had already done an AT3 hike a couple years prior. Mm-hmm. And so I was able to talk with him about gear and that sort of stuff. So I actually started the AT with, I think, a 15-pound base weight for my first ever trip. And I thought it was so cool.
That is respectable for a first ever through hike. Yeah, absolutely.
I had a lot of help in figuring that out, but I remember feeling so cool that I had an Osprey backpack, and I felt so cool being able to take the top loader off because I didn't need it. And I was like, all right, yeah, this is my flex right now. But that pack only lasted me to Virginia, Damascus. I got a ULA at that point, but 15 pounds is what I started with on the AT. I think I finished around 12. Okay. I want to say, yeah.
And then CDT.
So I'll go through the PCT and then back to the CDT because it's a weird kind of arc. So 15 to 12 on the AT. The PCT base weight was like 7.5, something like that. So I got even lighter. Yeah. Frameless pack. Used a tarp. Didn't have a tent. Super minimal stuff. Mm-hmm. And that's including my camera that I brought, which was a smaller camera at that point, but it's including all that sort of stuff. So 7.5. So I went really ultralight. And then for the CDT, having 4 years in between the PCT, doing a bunch of like smaller hikes, section hikes, other sorts of stuff, I'd found like, hey, if I can carry 3 pounds more of stuff and sleep better at night, that sounds great. So I never actually weighed my CDT weight before I started because I was just like, I'm bringing what I'm bringing, and the number doesn't matter to me at this point. It's whatever. But to kind of give a reference, I used a 40-liter frameless pack from Superior Wilderness Designs, Enlightened Equipment, 10-degree sleeping bag, that sort of stuff. Mm-hmm. Still was rocking the tarp, but this time had a Dyneema tarp from Hyperlite, and had a much bulkier, bigger camera. On this one, the camera itself weighed about, like the camera with all the camera gear was about 2.5, 3 extra pounds. So my total weight for CDT was somewhere in the range of 10 to 12 pounds when I started, something like that. So I actually went so I started a little heavier, went really light, and then got a little heavier again because sleeping on an air mattress is so much more bougie and fancy, and I got so much better sleep than just sleeping on the closed cell phone. And so I think actually it helped in the long run for me to just be happier with the hike because I was actually sleeping at night this time instead of just tossing and turning the whole time.
All right. And I have to award you some extra bonus points here for using the word bougie just 10 minutes into the interview. So fantastic.
That's how we do it.
Love it. Love it. I was going to ask you if the weight arc went down and then back up because that PCT hike was particularly difficult or painful with just 7.5 pounds worth of gear.
Yeah, and especially it bit me in the very end in Washington. I got snowed on the last 3-4 days in Washington. Up until that point, it really wasn't an issue with being cold or anything. But at that point, like I was freezing. I could barely sleep at night. And I didn't have pants. I didn't have proper pants. I was getting snowed on. I was like, this is dumb. I should not do this. Like, it's definitely worth the 4 ounces to get some wind pants or whatever it's going to be warmer than this right now, because this sucks. So that kind of informs some of it too. Just like, hey, sometimes inclement weather happens even in the middle of summer, especially on the CDT. So bring a couple extra layers. Like I had my hiking shirt on the PCT. I had my hiking shirt and a fleece and a rain jacket, and that was it for top layers. And then I just had shorts on the bottom, and that was it. So it was one of those things where I was like, I probably went a little bit too light there at the end, and it worked out fine, but it was not comfortable or fun at all.
Yeah, that's the super flex right there is 7.5 pounds, but that comes at a cost, right? That comes at a cost of comfort and inclement weather preparation. So, all right. And you said you went with a tarp for both the PCT and the CDT.
Yeah, I've been doing tarps or cowboy camping ever since doing the PCT. The AT, I had a 6 Moons, like a tarp tent or a trekking pole tent. So it was still pretty light, but I found that I don't really mind bugs that much. And if it's particularly a buggy section that I know I'm going to be going into, or if it might be a colder section, I actually have a bivy that I'll bring at certain points of the trail. CDT, I just carried it the whole time because it was also nice to help keep my bag clean, keep the dirt out. And so, I've just been doing tarp stuff. And when I've been working in wilderness therapy outside of trail, and especially my most recent gig, I live under one of those Home Depot blue tarps in the middle of winter. And so I was like, yeah, if I can do this in the middle of winter, I can do this in the summer and it'll be fine. So,
right. And have you experimented with different pitches for the tarp? Do you have a favorite pitch?
I actually have a catenary tarp with Hyperlight, so it's really only one pitch is what you got. If I were to do it again, hindsight, I would either get the flat tarp and be able to do at least like a 3-wall style. I've also been looking at their pyramid tarp, which is super awesome and cool. It's just kind of heavy for what it is, but it's bomb proof and rock solid in any wind. I hiked with a guy on the CDT for a little bit who had one, and he's like, yeah, I could set it up in like 80-mile-an-hour winds and be totally fine. It's like, dude, that's nuts. So yeah, I've been thinking about branching out that direction, but we'll see. I gotta get some funds back first.
Okay. And speaking of funds, let our listeners know for your 12.5, 13-pound pack for the CDT, how much money you have invested in that?
Let's see.
What does it take to be a 12-pound base weight? How much money does it take to get there?
So personally for me, I was lucky enough to have a relationship with Enlightened Equipment and Garage Grown Gear.
Nice.
Prior to this trail. So I was able to actually get some stuff free of charge or at the exchange of photography work, which is something that I've been doing for a while. So for me, it didn't really cost that much. However, I would spin it and say that if you were to pay just like the shelf price for all that gear, minus my camera stuff, I won't include that. I would guess it would probably be in the neighborhood of maybe $1,300, something like that. Because really the two biggest expenses are the Dyneema tarp and the sleeping bag. The sleeping bag that I got is like a 950 fill, 10-degree solid bag. I think it's like $500. And then the Dyneema tarp, I think, goes for around $300. That's $800 right there. And the rest of the gear is not that expensive. And So yeah, it's not crazy expensive. It's not super cheap either. I've also done some research in the past of how to do a complete ultralight setup for like $800 too. You trade in the Dyneema tarp for a silk nylon tarp. You get a little bit cheaper of a sleeping bag, that sort of stuff. So it's definitely possible to get a sub 10-pound base weight for under $1,000.
Okay.
Just kind of depends on, where can you find the deal, and are you cool with not having the trendiest gear, but it's still sort of thing.
Right. Now let's get to the heart of the matter here. This is a question that I asked to find out how focused you are on ultralight. Have you cut your toothbrush in half or drilled holes in your toothbrush to get rid of those grams and cut off the straps on your pack?
Oh boy.
There you go.
Can you
You're
hear me?
back. Yep, you're all right. We had a little disturbance in the force there. You still there? There you go. You're back. Can you hear me?
All right, can you hear me now?
I can hear you. Yes, I can hear you.
Okay.
See you.
I'm gonna move the location. Hopefully it works a little better.
Okay. And I'm checking my
Sorry
screen here.
about that.
Yeah, it's okay. I think I'm good here. Okay.
Okay. Let's see. Ooh. Okay. All right.
There we
Is
go.
this working?
Yep, we're good. We're good.
Okay, cool.
So I'll start with my question again. I'll just edit out the middle part here. So let's
Cool.
get to the heart of the matter here. This is the question I asked to determine how focused you are on being ultralight. Is your toothbrush cut in half, or do you have holes drilled in your toothbrush to get rid of those grams? Have you cut off the straps on your pack?
I do not.
Okay.
I have one of those travel toothbrushes that like the plastic ones that has the cover on it, because I think it's more gross to brush your teeth with a toothbrush that's got a bunch of dirt on it. So yeah, it's worth it to me to keep the extra zero point 0.1 ounce question mark. So
Good point.
yeah, I don't know. I've trended more and more away from not trying to care too much about being as light as possible as the years have gone on. It's just kind of like, yeah, no, this is light enough. I know the gear that works for me, and if 6 ounces is going to be what determines me not finishing this hike, then I got other problems.
Well said.
So yeah.
Now, do you bring a stove with you, or are you a cold soaker?
I do a stove. I did a what are they called? The tin alcohol stoves on the AT.
Yep.
So I did one of those in the AT, cold soaked the PCT, found out that was disgusting and I don't like that anymore. And I want to eat warm, hot food and be happy with my life. And so I've been using a stove ever since.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Of course, I haven't done the long trails, but I have done some extended hikes, and I have played around with cold soaking, and I think I came to the same realization as you.
Yeah. It's, I don't know. Like, I have a pot that has a lid that screws on, so like I can if I run out of fuel or something, but I would much rather have hot food at the end of the day. It's such a morale boost to not be sipping on cold ramen.
Yeah, agreed.
Yeah, I don't need to do this to myself.
All right. Hey, before we get too far down the trail, let's back up a little bit. Let's talk about your background. Where you grew up. Did you grow up playing any sports or have any outdoor experiences with your family? And how did you get involved in the thru hiking cult? Because that's really what it is. I mean, it's a movement that convinces people to live in the dirt for months on end. And so tell us all about that.
Yeah, so I'm from Wisconsin, and that's actually where I am right now. Once I finish trail, come back to see the family for a little bit. So yeah, I grew up here my whole life, southern Wisconsin. I like the standard sports up until high school, like football, baseball, that sort of thing. Once I hit high school, I started playing tennis and found out I was decent enough at it. And so when I went to college, I actually played for a couple of years on my college team. So Division III, don't get too excited about it. I'm not that amazing, but played a couple years of tennis. And then, after college, I went to school for recreation management degree. So I always kind of knew that I wanted to do something in the outdoor world. My previous experiences with that was mostly like summer camp. Because as a family, we didn't go west of, I think, Minnesota ever when I was younger. And so I didn't even know what mountains were until I was in my 20s. And so, yeah, I knew I wanted to do that. And so my first job out of college was outdoor education with a YMCA camp in Michigan, the same camp that my buddy who had hiked the AT a few years prior, that's where we met up. And it was okay. And, it got me into the work world a little bit, but I also kind of felt like there was something that was lacking. And just by pure happenstance, I ended up just scrolling through Instagram one day, and I saw these pictures of this thing called the Appalachian Trail, and I was like, I think my buddy Matt's done that. I should look into this. This looks cool. And I ended up just doing a deep dive in the winter of 2015-16, and by February, time was rolling around. I was like, well, my job's done June 1st. I guess I'm gonna go hike June, right after that. And so that's how I kind of got started into it. It's just kind of looking for adventure, looking for, I don't know, I've never wanted to work like a corporate job or have an office or any of that sort of thing. I think life's more exciting when you tell the world, no, I'm going to do it this way that no one else is really doing it, because you see a different perspective. And that's how I got started into it. And, for the first couple months, I wasn't into it, but I was too stubborn because I had told everyone, I was like, yeah, I'm doing this thing. I was too stubborn to quit. So I just kept going. And it wasn't until I started doing my flip flop where I started really enjoying trail. So as I said earlier, I started in June, and come late July, I was like, this is dumb. I hate this right now. I remember my last day of hiking north, I called my mom, just like to complain, in my mind, to complain about how crappy this was. And later on, she told me that I wasn't making much sense. So we think I was having like a heat exhaustion moment, and that's how hot it was. Like it was in the 90s at night. It was bad. And so when
it was bad enough for you to call your mom and talk gibberish.
Yeah. She was like, I don't really know. You were saying weird stuff. I kind of made it out. But yeah, it wasn't good. I was not doing well. So I ended up taking about a week off, and then went back to Maine, started going south. I was like, well, at least it's gonna be cooler up in Maine. And from that point, when I summited Katahdin on August 9th, I was like, this is pretty cool, actually. I like this part. I'm not dying of sweat. Actually get to see some stuff. It's not a green tunnel the whole time. That's really where I started to get into it.
And so for our listeners out there who may not know what flip-flopping is, give us the definition.
Yeah. So flip-flop through hike is you're still hiking the entire length of the trail in one season. It's just that you're not doing it in a traditional completely north one direction or completely south one direction. So for my example, I started on the southern terminus, went north for 800 miles, and then jumped up to the northern terminus, and then hiked back south to where I had gotten off previously. So I still did all the trail miles. I just did it in, partial northbound, partial southbound. And there's a couple of ways you can do it. You could, start in the middle and go north and then south, and, get to see both terminuses at the ends. So yeah, there's different ways you can do it, but in general, it's kind of like bucking the trend of a traditional, I'm going just north or I'm going just south.
Yeah, and that might happen for a variety of reasons. I know that on the PCT, folks have had to flip-flop because of, high snow in the Sierras and it being impassable.
Oh, we can talk about high snow in the Sierra.
Yeah, okay, good. You and I were you were on the PCT in 2017. I was on the JMT in 2017. So I do want to hear about the dates of that. Maybe we came close to each other.
The gauntlet.
Yeah. But before we get to that though, how do you pay the bills currently?
So I'll be going back to work. After the PCT, I started working in wilderness therapy primarily, which is like taking kids, young adults that are struggling with depression, anxiety, drug abuse, family problems, usually a combination of all sorts of stuff like that. Mm-hmm. Taking them out for an extended period of time into the wilderness to kind of partially get away from that environment that created those problems, and also to hopefully instill a sense of like personal being and self. Find a lot of lot of the times, especially in those formative years of adolescence, that kids are just looking for a way to be able to fit in, but also find themselves. And so having that as something that, they can have as an experience, because they're out there for like 2 to 3 months as a teenager. And that can be a really powerful experience, especially when you're in that wilderness therapy setting, because you're also guided through it by the staff, which would be me, as well as therapists, like licensed therapists that you might see in like a hospital or a clinic, something like that.
Licensed therapists out on the trail.
Yeah. They come out from, it kind of depends on the program. I've worked for a couple different ones at this point. But each one kind of has their own style. They're usually out for a couple days during the week having, therapy sessions, kind of not exactly what you think of, just like lying on the couch and talking about your problems in like, in that sense. But, like, hey, all right, if I'm your therapist or something, it's like, hey, let's go for a walk on this trail and let's talk. Let's talk about what's going on with you and your family.
Mm-hmm.
So,
and a lot of success stories that you have seen and been involved with?
I'll put it this way. I haven't seen anybody who has completed the program come out worse than they went in. Especially with mental health, it's such a progression. It's not I'm gonna do this thing and then boom, I'm fixed, I'm good. For a lot of people, it's hey, this is another step forward in my process of working through whatever it is I'm dealing with, trauma,
mm-hmm.
trying to figure out who I am, that sort of stuff. So it's always a sliding scale, but 98% of people that go through it come out better than they went in. Sometimes it still means, hey, your journey's not done yet. You still gotta, go to some sort of aftercare. You should still see a therapist when you're done with being here, especially because it's a huge culture shock to have been living in the woods for 3 months and then go right back to that home situation that you were, struggling with in the first place. So being able to continue that process is really important. But I think it's a really good intervention to be able to kind of like pull people aside and be like, hey man, like life's not going so great. Let's take a break for a minute and hopefully try and teach you some skills to be able to combat this a little bit better.
Yeah, one of the common themes that keeps coming up again and again on the podcast here is the transformational power of nature and the trail.
Yeah.
And that, you're working with troubled teens, but, just anybody that goes out into wilderness for an extended period of time come out different, and they come out different for the better.
Yeah, I would often talk with students. I'd be like, hey, I haven't gone through a structured wilderness therapy like y'all, but through hike's a little wilderness therapy personal for me. Like I don't have necessarily a therapist to guide it, and it looks different, but it's important. It's important to be able to have that experience of like taking yourself out of society for a while to just be like, hey, I'm gonna go do me for a little bit and make sure I'm good, and this is how I do it. So, nature is healing for sure.
Yeah, not only are you unplugging from society for a while, but you're out there alone in your head for a lot of time. I mean, there's a lot of inner conversation that takes place.
Yeah. Yeah. And especially on the AT, because I didn't have a podcast or anything like that. I had, I think, 100 songs on an iPod, which, after about 2 weeks, I was like, all right, I'm sick of these 100 songs. And that's all I got, though. So, being able to think through a lot of things. It's always a good point on trail when you realize, I've run out of things to think about. It's pretty satisfying.
Nice. Let's talk about the AT. So you did some research, you heard from a friend, you prepared for this, and then you went out there. And did it meet your expectation? Did reality live up to the hype, or was it something completely unexpected out there for you?
I researched it too much. I distinctly remember a day, probably like mid-July or so. I wake up and I'm walking in the morning. I'm going to catch sunrise at McAfee Knob, one of the most photographed spots in all of Virginia, much less the AT. And I get there for sunrise, and the sunrise just peeking out over the ridge, far off to the east. And I remember sitting there looking at it go and just thinking to myself, like, I feel like I've already been here. And that was kind of a bummer for me, because it's like, man, like it's cool. I was like, dang, this is really beautiful. This is a really cool moment. I wish I didn't feel like I'd already been here and experienced it before, because in my research I'd seen that photo so many times. Like I had just dove so deep into looking at, hey, what do I expect on trail? What does it look like? All that. And, watching so many YouTube videos on it. And then I got there, I was like, man, I feel like I've already been here. And I don't know, I didn't like that experience a lot. And I changed it for, the following hikes. The PCT, I didn't really do any research at all, which was nice because like it all felt fresh, which was really cool. But on the AT, I had found that the way that I was motivated the most to keep going and not become overwhelmed by like the gravity of how big this thing is that I'm trying to do. Because on the surface, like walking from Georgia to Maine is absurd. It's a long way, and if you think about that every day, you're just thinking about like, man, this is so far. I'm not making any progress. It feels like you're not moving at all. But if you can reframe it and be like, hey, all I got to do is get to the next resupply and then eat some food, take a shower, and then worry about the next bit. So if I can just worry about this bit between here and there, I'll be good. That's 70 miles. That's not that bad. That's going to be 4 or 5 days. I can do that. You can do that for 4 or 5 days. And eventually you do that enough times and, hey, shoot, I made it all the way. And so that kind of is how I framed the rest of my hikes after that. It's something that I learned was like, yeah, man, you don't have to research everything about this trail. If there's permits and stuff, make sure you get your permit, that sort of thing. If you know that there's a section up ahead that could be vastly different than what you've been doing, such as going from Southern California into the Sierras during a high snow year, you should probably learn, the skills you need to navigate that safely and what gear you need to have sent out to you ahead of time. But, for the little stuff like, am I going to hike from, I don't know, if I'm going to hike from X town to Y town and then from Y town to Z town, for the most part, it's going to be pretty similar in how I approach it. So just go from X to Y first and then go from Y to Z after that, and so that's kind of why I've stayed away from hiking videos of places that I haven't been yet that I want to go.
Yeah, you learned from your own experience there on the AT, and your conversation right there reminded me of an old proverb of, how do you eat an elephant? One bite at a time.
One bite at a time.
You cannot consider the whole huge beast all at one time. And similar with a long trail, you just have to get up, break camp, hike 25, 30 miles, make camp, go to sleep, and then do that again 135, 140 times, and you're done, right? That's all you have to do.
Yeah. I mean, when you break it down like that, it's like, what's the average length between towns on a trail? 3 to 6 days. All right, cool. Go hike 3 to 6 days, take a shower, eat some good food, feel good about life again, recharge, and then go do it again. And just keep doing that, and eventually you get there.
Nice. And did you do the long trails solo, or did you go with buddies, or did you pick up a family along the way? How'd that work?
I've always started trails by myself. I haven't started intentionally with anybody. And I've always found cool people to hang out with. The one exception being the Te Aotearoa down in New Zealand, and I did that at a weird time of the year. We could talk about that later. But the intention that and especially with the CDT and approaching it that way, was knowing that there's going to be people out there that I'm going to get along with and people I'm going to be able to hike with. And one of the biggest fears when I was first starting the AT was that I wouldn't find anyone. I'd be out there by myself. And then, that prospect of that is really scary. It's like, oh man, I'm walking from Georgia to Maine by myself. That's wild. But I met someone like, I don't know, within the first hour of trail that I spent quite a bit of time with. And so, yeah, I've always prioritized just meeting people out there.
Go ahead, drop some names. Who'd you meet on the AT?
I immediately jumped to my guy Otter. I think that's the only trail he's done. But he's given me congratulations and stuff on the other ones. We reminisce every now and then. So shout out to Otter. I don't know if he listens to this. But then you meet people. You meet people all over the place. Brother Raccoon, this goofy dude. I love that guy. Weebles, Ladybird. Oh man. Agent. There's so many people on the AT. And I feel bad as now it's 5 years ago. I'm starting to forget trail names, which is bad, but the memories are still there.
Nice. Now they refer to the AT as the green tunnel because you're walking in cover for a lot of the trail.
Yeah,
and
yeah.
Tell me how the AT compares to the PCT. I mean, they are two very different trails, aren't they?
Very, very. The AT, especially for me, I know some people, if you start pretty early, they don't have that green tunnel experience as much because the leaves haven't come in yet. By June, the whole trail is leafed in, and I didn't have very many views at all. And so I'll jump to the PCT for comparison. I remember my first day on the PCT down in Southern California near Mexico, walking along, and I get about a mile in, and I'm like, oh, wow, I already did a mile. This is really cool. And I was thinking to myself, this trail's like a sidewalk in comparison to the AT because it's so well groomed. It's graded for horses that it's so easy to make miles there. And then on top of that, you got views everywhere. I talk about the PCT as like you're constantly walking in a postcard. It's so cool. And so going from the AT where it's up and down a lot, it's basically a stair stepper, to the PCT where it's like, hey, this feels like a sidewalk in comparison, was really cool. This feel that confidence starting the trail and being able to just jump right into it and feel comfortable with doing bigger miles right away, which was really nice. I did like a 20 my first day on the PCT,
Wow, nice.
22 the next day, 26 the third day. And I was like, man, I didn't break 20 miles on the AT for like 2 months. So yeah, it was a huge, huge change.
And did you happen to stay with Scout and Frodo prior to the your first day on the trail?
I did not. I saw them at the terminus, which was
Okay.
cool. My cousin at the time was living in San Diego, so I stayed with him and his family.
Okay, yeah, we've had Scout on the podcast here. He was fantastic
Nice.
to talk to. Yeah, really cool.
He's such a cool dude, and like he knows so much about the history of the trails, which I think is really cool.
Yeah. Yep. All right. Hey, we're going to take a quick break, but when we come back, we're going to hear a bit more from Two Taps on the PCT, and I especially want to hear about his experience in the Sierras. So stay tuned for that. We'll be right back. The John Freakin' Muir Pod is sponsored by Outdoor Vitals, the ultralight backpacking gear company whose mission is to improve the mental, physical, and emotional health of mankind by facilitating impactful outdoor experiences. Outdoor Vitals creates innovative technical products with confidence-inspiring education that empower outdoor ultralight adventurers. Their focus on performance enables you to live ultralight with gear you can actually be confident with. Whether you're looking for an ultralight sleep system, shelter, or pack, or if you're looking for top quality apparel for the trail, you can find it at Outdoor Vitals. Do yourself a favor. Live ultra light. And welcome back. Talking to Two Taps, and when we left, we were talking about the PCT. Before we get to more details about the PCT and the Sierras, how long did it take you to hike the AT? How many days?
It took, I believe, about 148, 149 days, just shy of 5 months. I ended up taking about a week and a half off when I was doing the flip flop to go back, and I almost quit. I almost didn't go back because I was having such a bad time, and then the stubbornness kicked in, so that's why I kept going. So yeah, just shy of 5 months total on that one.
Okay, and not counting that week and a half, did you take many zeros in town days?
Yeah, not counting that week and a half, I took 10 zeros on the AT, so not a lot.
Okay.
I was going on a pretty tight budget on that one, so I was like, I can't spend a lot of money.
Yeah, more time in town, the more cash comes out, right?
Yep, absolutely.
Yeah. And then how about the PCT? How long did it take you there?
PCT was a bit quicker, 129 days. And yeah, with that one, I think I took 20 zeros, so doubled the zeros on that one. Had a bit more of a budget, that sort of thing.
Okay, 129 days with 20 zeros. That's a pretty good clip on the non-zero days.
Yeah, I found, especially on the Western trails where they're graded a little nicer, you can be more consistent with your miles. I tend to be really happy with like high 20s, low 30s once I got my trail legs. And just consistently being able to crank that out was, helpful in making sure I was still moving pretty quick, because I started May 11th because I knew it was going to be a big snow year in the Sierra. I was like, all right, I'll start later and let some of it melt out. Didn't really work out, but So started late, and then getting through the Sierras took a while. So by the time I got to Tahoe, I was like, shoot, I need to get moving, otherwise I'm gonna get snowed out of Washington. Which, spoiler, I pretty much did, but I made it barely. It was cold. So that was also part of the reasoning for hustling a little bit there on the second half of the trail.
Okay. Now the PCT, I like to say, has multiple personalities. There are very different feels to different sections of the trail. You've got the desert, you've got the Sierras, you've got Oregon and Washington. And I think those are all, even Northern California is different than the Sierras. Yeah. And so, tell us your impressions of the different sections, and what was your favorite?
I really enjoyed Washington. I ended up moving there after the trail just because I was so enamored with it, which was great. That was my favorite section. Probably the last 200 miles or so from Snoqualmie Pass to the border was just stunning. I feel like the Sierras would have been my favorite if I hadn't just constantly been like, I feel like I'm going to die today, and I don't like that. So I feel like that would have been a highlight, but I was just way too focused on just trying to get through without getting swept down a river. But I really enjoyed NorCal, which I know is controversial because I think a lot of people don't like NorCal. I love NorCal, and I think part of that is because it was the first time having consistently dry trail for like the whole day. So that was really nice to be able to be like, cool, my feet are staying dry. I like this. This is good.
And you're not post-holing.
Not post-holing. I actually didn't have much problem with post-holing. Because I went into the Sierras in late June, it had condensed pretty well, and there wasn't much in the way of storms. Like there was one day where it was like kind of stormy, but didn't even rain. And then outside of that, it was just bluebird days the whole time. So the snow had condensed pretty well. So it was hard to actually like post hole all the way through. So you're able to walk on top of it, even if it was slushy for the majority of the day, which was really nice.
Yeah, my son and I did the southern half of the JMT that summer, late July, and it was a high snow year, as you said, and the water, the rivers were just outrageous.
Oh yeah.
And there was, leading up to our hike, I had been reading all these reports, and there was reports that the South Forks, South
Fork of the Kings,
South Fork of the Kings, that you could not cross where the trail crossed the river. You had to find an alternate crossing because it was just too dangerous, and someone had died there. And so the whole time we were on the trail heading towards that point, I'm thinking, okay, how are we going to get across this? But we found a crossing point further north, and everything went just fine. But it was, it was a pretty hairy situation out there. A lot of dangerous conditions. Do you have any dangerous water crossings?
Yeah, I mean, South Fork of the Kings was not good. There was actually two people that unfortunately were killed in that river that year, and I didn't find out until I got north of Tahoe that had even happened. But one was a couple days behind me, and one was a couple days ahead of me. So I was right in the middle of that. Which was really, really sad because I remember looking on Guthook, and the Guthook red line crosses the river a couple times. I was like, well, why would we cross this a couple times? Like cross it just to come back. Let's just stay on this side and go up this route. It's all covered in snow anyway. There's no trail, so it doesn't matter. And so with my group, we didn't cross that one there. But I did have a problem in not Yellowstone, that's the CDT, in Yosemite, with Paiute Creek, which I don't think is on the JMT. I don't think it is because it's after Tuolumne Meadows. But Paiute Creek, I had gotten a little ahead of the group, and so I was like, it's at that point, just the whole meadow area was just flooded completely. Like the sign that said trail was like barely poking out of the water. And this is like a 3-foot tall sign. And like the bank of the creek is usually another 20 feet further than this. And so that's how flooded it was. But I saw that it was moving kind of slowly. So I was like, all right, cool. This is the first river I've had that's not just absolutely whipping by me. It looks decently shallow and it's moving pretty slow. I can probably ford this one. I've done sketchier ones than this, I thought. And then I get, so I take off like my shirt, I take off my backpack, I'm holding it above my head and just trying to keep everything dry. And I start walking across with my pack over my head. And I get till about waist deep in this creek. I'm like, all right, cool. Waist deep, this is fine. I'm not even really getting pushed much by the current. until I take one more step forward and I find out that there's just a huge drop off. And so I could go immediately from the water at my waist to over my head. And I'm just like one hand dog paddling as hard as I can to get to this down tree that's like another 15 feet further out there in the river. And I got there fine, but I was like, that was the one time I was like, this is dumb. This is stupid. I really am not having a good time at all with this. It's like end of the day, I'm all soaking wet now. Yeah, it sucked. But that was probably one of the sketchiest moments I had on trail was like, oh shoot, like, I'm getting pushed. There's a bunch of down trees and stuff. Like I get hung up on that and stuck under one or something. I hope like trying to keep my pack dry. It was a mess. Yeah, the Sierras was a mess. It was in hindsight dumb to go through. Like, and I've been telling people like, I never ever want to do that again. And at the same time, I'm glad I did it. Just, I don't know, but I'm stubborn and I just wanted to keep going north and I didn't want to flip or skip or anything. I was like, no, I just want to keep going. And we did it. But yeah, I wouldn't do that again.
Sounds like a lot of type 2 fun.
Type 3 fun.
Type 3 fun. Okay, very good.
Yep.
Next
not
level.
Fun to do and not fun to talk about.
And I question: is that even fun? Then should that be a category of fun if it's not fun to do or talk about?
It's one of those things where it's like you don't want to glorify it because then it gives people the wrong impression. It's like, hey, they did it, why can't I? Sort of thing.
Mm-hmm.
But as we talked about earlier, people died like where I was. Mm-hmm. When I was out there on the PCT doing the exact same thing as them. And, no long trail should be worth you dying over. That's like, I get that accidents happen. And like, I saw South Fork of the Kings. I saw where that happened. And that was scary. Like just even looking at it, I got so much anxiety. And even like weeks after leaving the Sierra, I remember just hearing a stream north of oh man, it's not Carson. It starts with a C. It's in Northern California. I can't remember the name of it. Chester.
Okay.
It's near the halfway point. And I remember walking around a corner and I hear just a trickle of running water and I can feel myself tense up and get like anxious about it. Cause I'm like, I gotten so used to like, all right, man, as soon as you hear water, it's go time.
That's a bit of PTSD right there.
For sure. Yeah. It was bad. And, it's just stunningly beautiful, but at the same time, it's like, man, I don't know if that's worth it. And so, I do want to go back to the Sierra at some point in like August where I can just chill.
Yeah. Nice.
Yeah.
Now, I've also heard a big difference between the AT and the PCT is the number of states that you go through. So in the AT, you're going through a lot of smaller states. And so it feels like you're making progress because you've gone from one state to another. But the first, I don't know, was it 1,800 miles of the PCT is California? And it's like you are never getting out of California. Did you feel that?
I didn't feel it as much as I think most people because I had that mindset of just get to the next town. Mm-hmm. Like, don't worry about how far it is. And so I started, I was like, all right, cool. I'm just going to get to, I'm going for the border. Cool. I'm going to Warner Springs. It's 120 miles. It's not ridiculous, something like that. If you want to get to Warner Springs, it's like, all right, cool. You're going to Idlewild. That's 40 miles, and stuff like that. So just keeping that approach of like, hey, just get to the next resupply point, the breaking it down is really nice. Also, I think most people kind of divide California by how Guthooks divides it between Southern California, 700 miles. You got the Sierra for like 500 miles, say 400 miles. Then you got Northern California for the rest. So that 1,700 miles that California is, divided by 3, it doesn't feel as ridiculously huge as California actually is. And then, you get to Oregon and Washington, they're 500 miles, 450 and then 500 miles. So by that point, it's like, I've already done 1,700 somehow. Can do another 900.
There you go. Now, before we leave the AT and the PCT behind and move to New Zealand, can you boil it down to what is your favorite memory from each of those trails?
Oh, on the AT, it would have to be Saddleback Mountains up in Maine. The day that I was going over there, I looked later on, it was 50 mile an hour consistent winds with gusts of over 80 miles an hour. And it's a bald mountain. Once you get up there, you got about a mile and a half of just open. And so the wind is just whipping. It is one of the windiest up until the CDT. That was the windiest hiking experience I'd ever had. And I'm legitimately getting blown over. I'm trying to walk and the wind is knocking me on my side. And I remember getting down the other side, just going like, dude, that was cool. I did it with my buddy Jupiter, when he was hiking, the Eastern Continental Trail, which goes from Canada down to Key West. Huge trail.
Jupiter hikes.
Jupiter hikes. That's
yeah.
The one.
He was a former guest. Yeah.
Oh, nice. Yeah. He's cool, dude.
He's a great guy. Yeah.
I got to do saddlebacks in Maine with him when he was on that, and we were just laughing the whole time, just being like, "This is so cool." So that was probably my favorite AT memory.
Okay.
And then the PCT, I'd have to say the Glacier Peak Wilderness in Washington. It's about 150 miles, 100 miles or so from the finish. And we just had stunning weather through that section. You're walking around a volcano in just like the heart of the Cascades. And I was walking around a corner and I legitimately just was overwhelmed with the magnitude of, it was the first time I was like, man, I'm actually doing this. Like, I'm actually going to finish this. And just being overwhelmed with that emotion of having come so far, battling through the Sierra, dealing with constant forest fire problems in Northern California and Oregon, and then getting to this near end point and just having it be so stunning. I just stopped and I started crying on the trail. It was just like, this is wild. Like, how am I this lucky to have this as my life right now? And just appreciating it, but also kind of mourning the sadness for what was coming, because I knew it was coming to an end. I was like, man, I don't know if I want this to end. And then it snowed for 3 days at the end. I was like, all right, we can end now. But at that time, it was stunning. It's still one of my favorite places I've ever hiked.
Yeah, that sounds like quite a moment. Yeah. Now let's move on to New Zealand. Last season, we had on the podcast Elena Osborne, who goes by Tip Tap. Tip Tap, yeah, that's right.
I met her when she was on the PCT. I did a little trail magic out of Snoqualmie Pass and ran into her. Yeah, yep, her video was stunning.
Yeah, incredible. We talked to her about her PCT travels, and then she took us through the TA and told us all about that. So how did you get the idea in your head to do the TA down in New Zealand?
So 17, finished up the PCT in September. Felt kind of lost for a couple of months, found out about this wilderness therapy gig, which got me out to Washington. It was the first time in my life where I actually got a job where it was like making a bit of money. So I was able to put some money away. And the particular company I was working for had a break over the winter. It was like a 4-month break. And it's like, you have a job next season if you want to come back. We understand if you need to move on to other things and find a good job over the winter. But I'd been able to save enough that I was like, well, I have a guaranteed job starting late January if I want it. And so, I've got 4 months to kill. Why not go somewhere cool? And I was missing the hiking scene a lot. And I was like, well, what's something cool I could do in the Southern Hemisphere? New Zealand. Up until that point, always been one of those places. I'm a huge Lord of the Rings nerd. It had been one of those places like, I would love to go here and I don't think it'll ever happen. But, the stars aligned and it was like, well, you got 3 months and enough money to go hang out in New Zealand for 3 months if you want, and they have a trail down there. And so I went down to New Zealand and hiked part of the TA. Now, caveat, disclaimer, I only ended up hiking the South Island, but from what I've heard, it's the best half. So I'll take it. I'll finish the North Island at some point. But I was able to go down there. I ended up spending a month working in a hostel in Queenstown, which is like the place where they invented bungee jumping, if that gives you an idea of how cool this place is. So I worked in a hostel, was a vagrant down there, and then hiked the South Island of New Zealand in 40 days. And then, hung out for a little longer, saw a couple pals, and then took off to go back to work.
That's fantastic. Now, Two Taps, I have to tell you that one of the highlights of my podcasting career was, I found, somebody recommended that I talk to Elena. And so I reached out to her, and through social media, and when she got back to me, she was in the middle of her TA hike. And so she said, I'm on the trail right now, let's reconnect when I'm done. And I said, great. Here's a link to the podcast. You want to listen to some episodes. And she told me afterwards when she came on and did an episode with us that she was listening to the John freaking Muir pod while she was in Lord of the Rings country on the TA. So just knowing that my podcast was being listened to out there, that's a highlight right there. That's good.
Yeah, it was cool. I was like, man, I'm getting to hike through Rohan right now. This is sweet.
That's right. Nice. Okay. And then you went from the TA in 2018-19 to doing some smaller trips in 2020. Was that because of the pandemic kind of limited your activities?
That was part of it. Yeah. So with hiking New Zealand, like I said, I did it in 40 days.
Mm-hmm.
The way that I did it, I started really early. So I did a south to north, which is like the equivalent of going southbound up here, just because southern hemisphere, so everything's flipped. And so I hiked by myself pretty much the whole time. I hiked with another person for 30 minutes. And, at the end of that, it was like, all right, cool. I'm glad to know that I can do this. I can do 40 days by myself. Like I saw people in town, but, you don't really form that tramily or anything.
Yeah. Were you looking over your shoulder the whole time for orcs and ringwraiths?
I wish. I remember hiking through one part going like, I think this is where they filmed the road scene where they first see the Nazgul and they're hiding under that tree.
Right.
Frodo
I remember that. Yep.
Doing weird stuff. So, yeah. But with that, it was like, I'm glad I know that I can do 800 miles by myself, but I don't want to do that anymore. And so in 2020, I was originally going to hike the CDT, and then COVID happened. Like, okay, I'll go southbound. And COVID was still happening. I was like, all right, I guess I can't do it this year. But what else can I do that is also close to home? And so being able to do the smaller stuff, even if it was solo, didn't feel as daunting, which was nice. Being able to go out, I did the Timberline Trail in a couple days. I did this infinity loop, like a figure 8 through the Three Sisters Wilderness near Oregon. Hiked some sections of the Oregon Desert Trail, stuff like that. I moved to Bend, Oregon from Seattle when the pandemic first started. I got a new job. So being able to do that stuff that was still close to home and I could still like stay connected with work and friends and that sort of thing, but also be able to still kind of scratch that itch a little bit, was really nice. And especially with just, I don't know, when the pandemic first started, I was part of a Zoom call group. It was like a hiker support group. It was all the thru hikers. They're just like, man, I just can't get out. And everything's on lockdown. This is back when we thought it was like the zombie apocalypse was happening. So it's like no one was leaving their house. And so I just felt so lucky to be like, well, I'm really lucky that I live in a really cool place and I can go, drive 45 minutes and be at the trailhead for sisters, stuff like that. So it was prioritizing just, experiencing the new place that I was living.
I love that hiker support group on Zoom.
It definitely was
during the pandemic. Oh my gosh.
Yeah. It's like if you're a hiker in any capacity, it was like a friend. I was meeting like friends of friends of friends, people I'd never actually hiked with, but it's like I know one guy who knows another guy who knows another guy, and we all just get together. And yeah, it was fun. It was fun. It was needed.
Would those meetings start off with, "Hi, my name is Tip Taps, and I'm a hiker"?
It did for the people that we didn't know or that I didn't know. I was like, "Hey, I'm Two Taps. Yeah. Who are you? What have you hiked?" That sort of thing. The classic hiker stuff. How many miles you got? Scoping everyone out.
Right. So one of my questions was going to be, what's with the 4-year gap between the PCT and the CDT? But now it makes sense. And you took some time, did the TA, and then COVID came in and kind of delayed things for you. But when you finished the AT, did you know that you were going to be a triple crowner?
No.
You hadn't said to yourself at that point, I'm doing all 3 long trails come hell or high water. I'm going to do it.
No. And I didn't think I was going to hike again after the AT for a while until I was like, well, I missed this. I guess I'll go do the PCT. I heard some good stuff about that while I was on the trail. But it's always for me been one trail at a time. It was never, I want to do the Triple Crown.
Mm-hmm.
And I think that's also part of that gap between the PCT and the CDT. Because when I finished the PCT, I was 20, I just turned 24, 23. I just turned either 23 or 24. I don't know, math. Um, Early 20s. And I only really worked one job for 9 months. Other than that, I was working retail for REI just to pay for my next hike. And if I was going to do the CDT, it would be for the wrong reasons. It would be because I want to have this title of Triple Crown, whatever that means. Um, that would have been the main reason and the goal. And so for me, in waiting that long, and especially with having other hikes in between that, was what hike do I want to do? And it wasn't until I was done with New Zealand that I was like, all right, I think I kind of want to do the CDT, because after the PCT and realizing you need to do something else for a little while, because you can't have your whole life just be through hiking perpetually. At least for me, I need to be able to do multiple things, and having some semblance of a career is important to me. Even if it looks really weird compared to, all my college friends that are having kids and, getting promoted at their corporate jobs and stuff like that. And so, when the opportunity to go to New Zealand arose, I was like, cool. Yeah, I want to do this. I'd much rather do this than hike the CDT. So I was like, all right, cool. I'm gonna go do that. And then it wasn't until late 2019, the winter 2019, 2020, I was like, all right, I think I want to go see the CDT, because I was able to do a section in 2019 of Colorado with some PCT friends that were finishing up their Triple Crowns. And that was my first experience with the CDT and being able to hike through the San Juans, which is like kind of like the Sierra equivalent on the CDT.
That's like, what I've heard. Yeah.
Yeah. I was like, this is really cool. All right. You got me. I want to give this a shot. And then, had to wait the extra year because of COVID. But yeah, it's always been about hiking a trail because I want to be on that trail, not because I want to be Triple Crown or anything like that. I think that's the wrong reason to be out there for me. And I wouldn't have made it. I would have probably quit at some point.
All right. Now I know that the CDT is a long trail, so I feel a little bit silly asking this question. It's 3,100 miles. But I also know some other people that were out there at that time, and just wondering if you guys crossed paths at all. Are you familiar with Renee and Tim?
Yes, Tick and Talk.
Yes. Did you run into them at all, or?
I did. We crossed paths in West Yellowstone.
Okay, I'm talking to them tomorrow night.
Oh, nice. Yeah, they did a different route. This is one of my favorite parts about the CDT is there's so many different routes you can do.
A lot of alternates,
it's my roommate that I was living with in Bend had done the CDT and the GDT all in one go in 2019. So 3,800 miles. Dude's a legend. He's awesome. But he had told me before I was leaving, he was like, hey man, the red line doesn't mean anything. Go do what's cool. And so that's what I embraced with this trail. It was really cool. Like there was a stretch where I wasn't on the official CDT for longer than 2 days in a span of 3 weeks, up in Wyoming and Montana. And it was cool. It was like, man, go find your own adventure, which is what I loved about it. And so they were taking the official CDT out of West Yellowstone. I was doing an alternate. So that's where we crossed and split off. But yeah, they're really cool. They're really nice.
Yeah, they seem like a lot of fun. I can't wait to talk to them tomorrow.
Yeah.
Also, a former guest who was wrapping up his Triple Crown experience was Ivy Tat.
I ran into him in Pie Town.
No way.
Yeah, down in New Mexico. That was the only time I saw him. Yeah.
Were you familiar with him before you met him?
I knew who he was. I'd watched a couple of his videos.
Yeah.
Just for fun. Like I said, I don't really watch much in terms of like hiking YouTube stuff, just to, I don't want to ruin my own experience, that sort of thing. But I'd heard about him. I'd follow him on Instagram for a little bit. He takes some cool videos, and he's a character.
He is a character. He's a little rough around the edges.
He is.
I have to tell you that my mom is a faithful listener to the podcast, of course, and she heard his episode and heard he was going to do the CDT. And so she has watched every single one of his videos as he has gone from Mexico to Canada. And, she's a big fan of Ivy Tat.
Yeah, I don't want to ruin the mystique of Ivy Tat too much, but it's interesting meeting him in person versus his videos. It was like, you're definitely the same person, but like you approach things differently. It's really interesting. So
yeah, when he was on the podcast, I had not watched any of his videos. And so he was on the podcast and we had a really great conversation. I didn't have to put the explicit E on the episode or anything. And then I started watching his videos. I'm like, holy smokes.
God.
Yeah, okay. Hey there.
It's definitely his rant box on his YouTube, which is very entertaining to watch. So yeah. Ran into him in Pie Town. We both stayed at the Toaster House. It was kind of a quirky little spot in this town of like 100 people in the random New Mexico desert. CDT's weird. CDT's got some weird town stops.
Yes. Now, did you find? I've heard from Ginger Balls, who's a triple crowner. He did the CDT as his last trail, last long trail, and he said if he would have started with the CDT, that would have been his last hike, because starting off in New Mexico, there's a lot of questionable water sources, and there's a lot of wayfinding, right? I mean, there's not a clearly defined path for a lot of that in New Mexico.
So my experience has been, and I talked with my buddy Prodigy. I don't know if you've had him on the podcast.
No.
If not, you should definitely reach out to him. But so he did the calendar year Triple Crown in 2019. And so just being able to talk with his experience between 2018 and 2021, it sounds like the CDT's put a lot of effort into putting signage up, which has been really nice. I didn't find it all too hard with route finding. Is really only the boot heel in New Mexico, which is like that first 80 miles or so, where you're kind of going over flat expanses of nothing, and you just see like this tiny little stake way off in the distance with the CDT sign on. And you're like, all right, cool, I guess I'm going that way as navigation. But I didn't find it was super hard. I think the only thing that was rough was the section between Pie Town and Grants. There's like mile 400, 500-ish, somewhere in there, where it's just road like the whole time, and you're walking on roads. And I don't know, that was the one time where I was like, this road section sucks, just because it was really long, consistently just road. But honestly, New Mexico, I've liked it more than Colorado.
Oh, wow. Okay.
Yeah, it's got some really cool variety to it. You can go from like desolate desert, and 10 miles later, you're going uphill, you're in a conifer forest. And then you drop back down to desert, and you're in cacti, and you go to if you take the Gila River alternate, you're walking along the Gila River for a couple days. You got like cottonwood trees. It's a really cool spot. There's mesas, there's aspen. If you can only hike one state to get a taste of all of the trail, I think New Mexico is the one to do. Honestly, it's really cool.
Okay. Now, how many days did it take you to do the CDT?
CDT was 145 days with 26 zeros and then probably like 10 or so Neros. So yeah, the zero count keeps going up the more trails I do. It's like, you can hang out in town, it's fine. But this one I'd worked for, basically 2 years to pay for, and finally got a job that actually paid me some money. So I was like, all right, I can spend some money.
All right. And of the 3 long trails, what was your longest day mileage?
CDT ended up doing a 45. The intention was to do a 62 or a metric century. We had it perfectly lined up. Me and 5 other people were like, all right, guys, today's the day. We're going to do 100K. And we stopped exactly 62 miles from the road to Lander, Wyoming. So we're in the Great Divide Basin, where it's pretty flat. Again, a lot of roads, but it's like dirt gravel roads, it's like extra wide trail, really. And we started at 2 a.m., 3 a.m., 2 a.m., something like that, really early, and had 31 miles done by 12:30. And then we kept on going until mile 45, where my buddy Twerk just showed up out of nowhere making trail magic in the middle of the Wyoming basin. And his one rule was, you can have trail magic as long as you stay. And so we ended up staying and cutting our 62 miles short, but it's for a good reason.
Yeah, it was worth it. Trail magic. What kind of trail magic?
Oh, he makes the best food. I think that we were doing tacos that night. So much beer. So much beer. There might even been tequila floating around somewhere. He's got like his portable speaker just bumping music. Like, the dude knows how to trail magic. Like, it's incredible. Yeah.
Okay. Now I saw on your Instagram feed, looked like you were taking pictures with someone named Brittany.
Bullet. Yeah.
Bullet. Okay. Was she on the CDT? Was that?
Yeah. Yeah. She's actually from Bend as well.
Okay.
So yeah, she's out in that area. We hiked together. I saw her off and on in the beginning of the trail. She started the day before me, so we kind of bounced back and forth for the first 500 miles. Then we did from Grants, New Mexico, which is like 500, 550, up through about the middle of Colorado together before splitting.
Okay.
So yeah.
And did she finish?
She did. She actually finished the same day I did.
Wow.
Yeah, so we ended up splitting in Colorado and then bounced together around in northern Montana. And so we ended up finishing the same day. So yeah.
Very cool. Now, do you have a favorite memory from the CDT?
Oh man, Glacier was so cool. There's like favorite places and then there's favorite moments. Because I think those favorite moments, it's more so about the people that I'm with rather than where I am. And when I was in northern Colorado, I got to hike. I started hiking predominantly with the three other people, Tumbleweed, Paddles, and Sprout, who I had first seen in Silver City, which is like mile 150 or so. It's the first time I met them, but then I got ahead going through the San Juans and the snow and all that. And we can talk about the San Juan snow. But we linked back up in northern Colorado, and I hiked the vast majority of the rest of the trail with them. And I don't know, there's just like that feeling of trail family that I got so much love for them. They're just such cool people, so supportive. I was having a really rough time with trail in that time period, when we first started hiking together, and I probably would have quit if I hadn't found a group of really awesome people to be around, because I really just I was struggling and I really needed that support. And so yeah, being able to, like, every moment with them is so fun. And we finished together with a couple other friends as well, and with Taco, Big Sprout, and Chili Dog, which is really cool. And
I love the names.
Yeah,
those are awesome.
Yeah, they're great. Yeah, it's just, I don't know. I think from Bozeman, Montana to the end of the trail, it's just like every day was great with them. It was really cool. So that's where most of my favorite moments come in. And, one of them is in one of my favorite places would be the Wind River Range in Wyoming. Stunning. It's like the Sierras, but more cool and less people. And then Glacier at the very end, being able to finish in such a absolutely unique, wild place and do it with them was really cool. So.
Okay. And we've heard a lot about the cool moments, the favorite moments. Any moments out there where you're like, what in the heck am I doing out here? What have I gotten myself into? I might not survive here.
So I was doing really well with hiking up until Colorado. And that's when we first started running into snow. And Colorado snow is not Sierra snow. I talked earlier about how the Sierra snow, you didn't really post hole much because it was all condensed. In Colorado, we were there about a month earlier than when I was going into snow on the PCT when I was doing that. On top of that, Colorado rains a lot and storms. Like, it's thunderstorms pretty much every afternoon. And so that leads to, when it rains on the snow becomes rotten, and it's just like you can't stand on top of it. And so the first full day out of Pagosa Springs, I think, was probably one of those times where I was like, this is dumb and I hate this right now. Woke up at 5:30 and was trying to get up early to walk on top of the snow. Hopefully it was solid enough at that point where you could walk on top of it for a bit before you start post-holing for the rest of the day. And was able to do it for maybe half an hour. So starting at 6 a.m., I am post-holing every single step there is, and it's just snow. There's no trail. There's nowhere that's dry for you to walk, and end up doing 6 miles in 7 hours. At that point, my feet have been submerged in snow the whole time, and so they've gone numb, and I can't feel them anymore. And so this is what it's like, hey, got to stop for the day. And like, I can't keep doing this. And so stopping below a pass, because the goal was to get up and over a pass, but the storm was rolling in. It was like, well, I'm not going to be up exposed above tree line when a thunderstorm's happening. That's just dumb. And so it turned into doing 6 miles that day and like warming up my feet for the rest of the day and just being like, hey, I was going in with the intention of hiking the CDT on the official route through the San Juans, which mostly is above, at or above tree line, and it's going to be snowed in the whole time. After that day, kind of reassessed that and was like, hey, maybe we need to find a different way to do this. And so the next day, hopping down onto the Creed cutoff, but turning off of that and walking on the highway for a while to head back up to the trail at a different point, actually, which is where the origin of the Rio Grande is. So it's basically hop down off the divide, go to the Rio Grande, walk up the Rio Grande until get back to the trail, which is about halfway through the San Juans. And that's the bit I had hiked before, so I kind of knew what I was getting into at that point. And I was like, well, I got snowshoes, and it's flatter on this bit, so if need be, can use snowshoes. And so, being able to kind of adjust and create, like this was not an official route by any means. It was hey, let's build a route that will work for us sort of thing, which I think is really cool.
Yeah.
Totally. Yeah. We're going to call it the Rio Grande Alt. I don't know, something like that. But yeah, it actually worked out really well because by the time ended up getting back up to the CDT, which was like 4 days later, had a couple sunny days in a row, which was really nice to help the snow condense. So it was much easier to walk on top of it. You could actually start making some decent miles.
Okay. Hey, what's next for Two Taps? And if you don't have a what's next, I've got a couple of suggestions.
I mean, I'm happy to hear your suggestions.
Okay. I think you're ready for the Hey Duke.
Dude, I was talking about this before I went on this hike with some homies back in Bend. They were like, hey, I'll have my trail legs if you guys are free. I don't think it's going to happen this year, though, just because water in the Southwest this year is stupidly low. So,
yeah.
But maybe next spring. Well, I don't know. We'll see.
Yeah. Hey Duke, that is a lot of type 2 fun.
Yeah. And I haven't really done much in Utah. So that'd be really cool to get down there. But yeah, right now it's kind of I'm looking to head back out west here soon. Gonna road trip out with my dad and have some father-son time, which will be really cool. Currently my plan is I'll be going back to doing the wilderness therapy for a couple months in Bend, just kind of get back on my feet sort of thing. And at the same time working on building my photography business. So you said you saw a couple posts on Instagram, that sort of thing. And I started photography on the AT, just strictly because I wanted something to do other than walking. And after 5-6 years, it's blossomed into something that's like, hey, I want to do this full time. I want this to be my job. I really enjoy it, and being able to capture those places and be able to share them, especially with people that can't experience the adventure of a thru hike, is, I don't know, it's really fulfilling. And that's how I got inspired to start hiking, is seeing cool photos and videos of people hiking, so going to these cool places. And so if I can do that for someone, that's really cool.
People need to go to your Instagram account and click on your link tree. I clicked on your link tree and go to your photography website. It is incredible. You've got some amazing shots there, Two Taps.
Thank you. I appreciate it.
Absolutely gorgeous.
It helps when you're hiking through really cool places. It makes it easier for you.
You got good material to work with.
Yeah.
That's right.
So yeah, this next year is focusing on building that up and entering the world of, what is adventure photography, trying to monetize that somehow. And, starting with that, I got a print shop up right now, trying to get artwork into people's homes. And, hopefully, if you see that photo of Glacier, with the clouds rolling over it and the autumn colors every day at your office at work, you might go, I think I need to go there someday. So
that's right. And that's a little bit of sanity in your office as well. I mean, you're able to look at that during the tough times and you'll be in a better spot. Now, Two Taps, after you finish the Hey Duke, then you'll be ready for the next step, which is the Barkley.
Oh God. I don't know about that. I walk so I don't have to run, man. Oh, I mean, I thought about it a couple times on trail about getting into trail running just because, especially with finishing a long trail, you're just so used to your endorphins and
Hmm.
serotonin and dopamine, all that flowing through your body all the time. And when you get off trail, it's just like you crash so hard. And I think that's where
Yeah.
the post-trail depression comes in big time. So being able to do 20 miles in 3 hours because you're running it as opposed to hiking it, you still are able to see some cool stuff. I don't know if I'll ever get to Barkley level
Yeah.
because that
Barkley,
is
Barkley,
insanity.
Barkley is trail running, but it's also wayfinding and it's also
Yeah.
sleep deprivation, right?
Yeah.
It is insanity.
Have they
You're
had any
absolutely correct.
finishers recently? I don't think they've had a finisher since
They
like
haven't had finishers in a while.
2016.
It's been
Yeah.
a few years. Yeah. That,
Yeah. I
that
know
tells
that
you how insane the race is.
yeah, I know that Legend did it,
Yep.
and that dude's wild. And if he can only make it two rounds, I don't know if I'll make it one.
Yeah.
But yeah, we'll see. I don't know. I won't
Yeah.
rule it
I've
out.
I've talked to a few guys who have participated in the Barclays. Talked to Mike Wardian, talked to Legend, talked to Hunter Leininger, and we're talking world class athletes here. I mean,
Yeah,
they are doing amazing thing. They're at the top of their game, and the
yeah,
Barclay just chews them up and spits them out. It
yeah.
is
It's wild. It's
crazy.
hilarious.
Yeah.
Yeah.
All right. Hey, Two Taps, you know where we are?
Where are we?
We're at that time of the episode where I turn to you and ask you for your pro tip insight of the week. What piece of
Ooh.
wisdom can you share with our listeners to make their next outdoor adventure even better?
All right. I learned this in New Zealand. So slight bit of backstory on this. New Zealand is a very wet country. It rains frequently. And what I've found is a lot of the TA, you're walking through fields and over rivers, and your feet are constantly wet all the time, all day. I had wet feet for 35 days straight out of the 40 days. So I had dry feet for the last 5 days. That was it. And so I had a lot of anxiety about having wet feet because I've seen and heard a lot about, if you have wet feet for a super long period of time, what can happen, where your feet just kind of deteriorate, start to rot, fungi. This is bad. And so I was very proactive in trying to find ways to mitigate that while I was hiking. And the thing that I found worked best for me is every single time that I was taking a break when I was on trail, I would always take my socks and shoes off and let my feet totally air out. And then if I was really struggling, or in each night that I was going to bed with my feet that were kind of damp, I would add a balm to the bottom of my feet. And what I found is I got zero blisters on the whole trail. I had no foot problems that had anything to do with having wet feet. And so for I don't know, I'm not a scientist, but if you got wet feet for any reason, anytime you're taking a break, even if it's just for 10 minutes, 15 minutes, I know it really sucks to put wet socks on. Trust me, I did a lot on the CDT as well. It sucks, but your feet will enjoy it so much more if you're able to dry them out as much as possible throughout the day, and try and take care of your feet because, that's the only way you're going to be able to keep moving is if your feet are doing all right. So dry feet, air them out anytime you're taking a break.
That's an excellent tip. If your feet are miserable, you are miserable. There's no way to enjoy a hike if your feet are miserable. Yeah. And that condition you're talking about when your feet are too wet for too long, that's called trench foot. And they saw that in World War I when these guys were in the trenches and the trenches would fill with water. So their feet would be wet all the time, and huge portions of their feet and skin would just slough off. And like you said, basically their feet are rotting in their boots, and very dangerous, gross condition. So excellent point. Yep.
Yeah.
All right. So there you have it. That's it. This episode is just about in the books. Hope our listeners enjoyed our time with Two Taps. I want to thank him for joining us this week. Two Taps, how can our listeners keep up with you on social media, and where can they find updates on your next adventures?
So I'm most active on Instagram. My Instagram is just my name. It is at Justin Helmkamp. Helmkamp is spelled Helmkamp. The other ways that you can keep up with my work, and especially the photography side of stuff, is on that Instagram. I have a link access that goes to both my website as well as my print shop. If you're interested in getting some prints for yourself, I do prints, canvas, metal prints, that sort of stuff. So the print shop is my name once again, justinhelmkamp.darkroom.tech. And then my website, which also, again, everything's pretty linked into everything else. My website being justinhelmkamp.com. Super simple, straightforward. And all of those sites have ways for you to contact me if you want to contact me, if you want to say hey, if you have any questions about the hike, that sort of thing. I try and check my DMs on Instagram. So yeah, feel free to reach out. I'll get back to you as soon as I can. And those are the ways you can find me.
Fantastic. Remember to check out the pod on social media as well. We're on Facebook, YouTube, Instagram, Twitter, and TikTok. And if you have comments or clips you want to share, you can send it to me at johnfreakinmuir@gmail.com. Two Taps, I'm also looking to you to share a recommendation for a book, a movie, documentary, some kind of adventure media to keep our listeners connected to the trail when they're at home. What do you have for us?
So, I said I don't watch YouTube videos. There's one exception, and we've talked about him already, is my boy Jupiter Hikes. He has an awesome YouTube channel, which is an excellent combination of both like tips and tricks on hiking and different hiking styles, as well as the more trail documentary type stuff. I really appreciate how he shoots his videos, being able to, he takes a more artistic approach to it, as opposed to just I'm going to stand here and talk into the camera while I walk and talk about my day. I like how he displays the trail through his work. So if you have a hankering for trail, check out his stuff. Don't dive too deep if you're going to hike that same trail, and don't ruin it for yourself. But yeah, he's a cool dude, and I can't recommend his stuff anymore. So
yeah, excellent content from Jupiter Hikes. Highly recommend that as well. Fantastic. And before we wrap things up, I've got one more segment for you called "What Have I Not Asked You That You're Dying to Tell Me About?" What did I miss?
Let's see here. We covered a lot on this one.
We did.
I guess this will be an upcoming thing. I'm looking to turn a lot of my CDT work, photo work, as well as writing, into a book. Again, it's in the works currently, that sort of thing. But I don't know if you're curious to hear more about that.
You have a working title for that book yet?
I have a couple ideas that I'm not totally satisfied with. The concept being a mix between a photo book as well as short essays and stories. And the goal is to kind of relate to those themes of the travel and the journey, not necessarily specific to the CDT, but using the CDT as the setting for those short stories and essays, as well as with the photos. And so, yeah, just looking for a way to do something different. I found a lot of the trail books are more trail journal, which isn't really my speed. I'm more interested in kind of like the philosophical side of, what does it feel like to be a thru hiker? What is this experience? How can you encapsulate it in words? Because I think that's something that so many hikers have such a hard time with post-trail, in trying to relate their experience to people that haven't experienced it before in that way. And so being able to provide not only the visual of what is the trail like, being able to also show that the philosophical end of things, and hopefully present it in a way that people who haven't been able to do a thru hike can relate to some of those themes and be able to talk with people who have done a thru hike. I struggle sometimes to even talk with my parents, who are the most supportive people in the world when it comes to thru hiking. I'm so blessed. But sometimes it's hard to be able to explain, what this means. What does this experience mean? And so that's the goal behind it. Still in the works. Don't have a working title for it yet, but yeah, when that happens, you bet it'll be all over my Instagram and website and all that sort of stuff. So
fantastic. Yeah. I would buy a copy. I want a copy. So keep me posted on it. Okay.
Sounds good.
That is a wrap from the John Freaking Muir studio. Any shout outs to friends and family? Two Taps.
Shout out to mom and dad, mama, papa Taps. Ever since I've started this, they've been so incredibly supportive. I've met way too many people whose families think they're just insane and don't want anything to do with what the thru hiking life is. And that's such a bummer because, my parents are so wonderful and supportive, and I really appreciate them. Shout out to Tumbleweed, Sprout and Paddles. I don't think I would have finished that stinking trail without them. And shout out to the trail organizations that make all this possible. These public lands stay public because there's people that care about them, people that take care of them, and being able to support them and give back is huge. And I definitely encourage everyone listening to either donate to your local trail organization, give some time where you can go do some trail maintenance because these trails don't build themselves, or just get involved somehow with making sure that our public lands stay public and access to everybody, and show the trail some love. So, and thank you, Doc, for having me on. I really appreciate being able to talk about it and keep that stoke high for the thru hiker life. So
well said, Two Taps. Well said. Thank you for tuning in. Always remember, the trail is the trail. It doesn't care if you want to go downhill. It doesn't care if it's almost dark and you're looking for a campsite. It doesn't even care if you're hiking solo for 800 miles in the land of orcs and hobbits. The trail is the trail. Embrace the suck.